Do you lack control, spin, or power on your one-handed backhand? If you're not confident in your one-handed backhand, then this video is for you. This two-part video series is going to be some of the most detailed information out there in regards to the ultimate fundamentals of the one-handed backhand. My name is Jeremy with Fundamental Tennis. If you find this video useful, please do me a favor and make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell. Don't let anyone pick on your backhand. Make it a weapon that your opponents will fear. I'm not going to go into great detail regarding the grip for the one-handed backhand, although you want your under base index knuckle to be on the center of bevel 1 or in between bevels 1 and 8. That is the range of acceptability in terms of the correct grip for the one-handed backhand. Now, the first tip, I'm going to tell you, we got 5 or 6 tips or so, and then next week's video we're going to have 5 or 6 as well. These are all fundamentals to the one-handed backhand. Each of these tips are incredibly important. Now, the first one I want to talk about is not talked about enough. This is a big one. When the ball comes and you've identified that you're going to hit a backhand, it's important that your hands should already be somewhat away from your body when you're in that ready position, your forehand grip. Now, once you see it's a backhand, we've got to turn here so you can see my spacing here. You see, when I change my grip with my left hand and then readjust my right hand on there, I'm going to keep my hands away from my body, okay? That's important so that you create space from the ball, or so that you don't get jammed at contact. So again, when the ball comes, we don't want the hands close to the body when we turn. The hands need to be away from the body. As you can see here, I have a lot of space between the racket and my body, a lot of space between my hands and the body. This is really going to help you with your shoulder turn and help you with your unit turn, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. Once again, keep the hands away from the body when you turn for that ball that you are receiving. Now, tip number 2, this is another huge fundamental. The racket head needs to be above your hands when you turn or when you take that racket back to prepare for the ball you're receiving. Many players, when receiving the ball, they turn with the racket down low. As you can see, the racket head is about the same level as the grip of my racket. What we want is to raise the hands slightly and have the racket head almost directly above the hands. As you can see here, my racket is up when I turn, right? I'm not turning with my racket down low. It's important to have the racket up during the take back or during the unit turn, because having the racket up is going to help you with rhythm, timing, power, and it will help you to be able to adapt to the different heights of balls and different speeds, direction of balls. Just simply help you adapt to the ball you're receiving. If your racket's always low, for example, and you're receiving a high ball, that's going to make it quite difficult to adapt to that high ball. So racket up during the take back to help you with rhythm, power, and adapting to different balls. New tip, this still has to do with the preparation. You're receiving the ball, you're turning, you're preparing, you're getting the racket back. When receiving the ball, it's important that your hands stay about in the center, the midline of your body, okay? So when the ball comes, I'm not just going to throw my hands back. You see how my hands are not in line with the midline of my body as it should be here. My initial turn, I should have my hands, again, in the midline of my body. As you can see here, I'm not throwing my arms back without turning. I'm not throwing my arms back and then turning. You can think of it as the turn is the backswing, and once again, the hands are pretty much in the midline of your body. So think of the turn is the backswing. We don't want to throw the arms back. We want to turn and just keep the hands where they are, the midline of the body. This is called a unit turn. This is important because if you don't keep this as a unit, keep your body connected, then you have to reconnect the unit turn or the unit later on in the swing, and that makes things more complicated. So make sure that the turn is the backswing and there's not much individual movement of the arms when you turn. So I'm gonna give you one more visual. See that here? I'll show you from the side view. The turn is the backswing. See how it's all connected, as opposed to just throwing the arms back and then turning later. Tip number 4, this has to do with the position of the hand or the wrist. Now, I will use a couple fancy words here, but I'd just like you to watch my wrist closely. If you look at my hand, when hitting a one-handed backhand, throughout the one-handed backhand, the hand or wrist should be extended, as you can see there. So watch, my wrist is neutral right now, and now my wrist is extended. The wrist needs to be extended, and then there needs to also be radial deviation, meaning the wrist or hand moves to the left. So we need wrist extension, and then we need radial deviation, as I just did there. So as you can see, I have a very strong wrist position. This extension and radial deviation in the wrist is really going to help you to control the ball. It's going to help with directional control. It's going to help you with topspin. Again, it's going to help you to keep that ball in the court more often. Very often players have a neutral wrist, so it's not extended. As you can see here, this is going to cause a lot of errors. You're not going to be able to control the racket so well. So again, we don't want a neutral wrist here. We want the wrist extended. And then it's important to have that radial deviation as well, because again, these two wrist positions are going to help you to control the racket, and of course the racket controls the ball, so it's important. So you're going to have that wrist extension and radial deviation during the backswing, the forward swing, and you're going to keep this wrist position somewhat throughout the contact phase and the rest of the stroke. The wrist position is important. It's going to help you control the racket, therefore help you control the ball. One last tip I'd like to give you in regards to the preparation for that ball that you are receiving. It's really important that you load most of your weight on your back foot or your back leg. So as a righty, hitting a one-handed backhand, I'm going to load most of my weight on my left leg. So as you can see here, I'm really loaded here. This loading is really going to help you to create a ton of effortless power. And in fact, you could do everything right. You could do all the tips I've given you in the fundamentals of this one-handed backhand video. Although if you don't load on that back leg, then you might not miss much, but you're not going to get that miles per hour that you could get. So you can get massive power, again, from loading that back leg here, and then, of course, unloading and transferring the weight towards that front leg. So we don't want the weight evenly loaded on both legs. We want a majority of the weight loaded on the back leg, as you can see here, and then I'm going to step in and unload that energy that I stored in my back hip. All right, last tip to today's part 1 video on the one-handed backhand. This is about the left hand. So your left hand, or your non-dominant hand, should be on the throat of the racket in the beginning of the stroke and throughout the backswing, and even during the downward swing just before starting the forward swing. So it's important that you have the left hand or your non-dominant hand on the throat of the racket for the right amount of time, meaning a lot of players keep their left hand on too long, and that can really cause a lot of mistakes in hitting in the net or hitting it out. Now, some players keep the left hand on, or they don't keep the left hand on or non-dominant hand on long enough. So it's important that the left hand or the non-dominant hand stays on the throat of the racket until the left hand gets to your back thigh, or your left thigh if you're right-handed. So let me show you from a side view. When we're receiving the ball, the left hand should already be on the throat. Left hand stays on the throat during the backswing. Left hand stays on the throat during the downward swing. And then once you're starting that forward swing and the left hand passes by your left thigh as a righty, that's when the left hand should come off. This is going to allow you to stay sideways, and it's going to allow you to have the correct swing plane and help you with your balance and the correct amount of hip rotation and alignment. So having that left hand on, again, until right here, when the left hand's in line with your left thigh or your back thigh, that's when the left hand comes off. So make sure you don't have that left hand on too long or not long enough. Keep it on until it goes in line with your back thigh. Again, this is Jeremy with Fundamental Tennis. Make sure that you subscribe, click that notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Next week is going to be part 2 to this one-handed backhand video series. We're going to talk about the forward swing, the racket drop, contact point, follow through, and much more. You don't want to miss it. I hope to see you in next week's video. Happy tennis.